This podcast is brought to you by Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine for those that love to make and drink great beer. Learn more online or subscribe at beerandbrewing.com or find us on social media at Craft Beer Brew. It's episode 272 of the Craft Beer and Brewing Podcast, and it is here. It's time for our annual Best in Beer episode of the podcast. We are dropping this and the digital issue in this amazing feat of timing so that you all can consume the digital content and listen to this very podcast for some background and context around all of those things, all at the same time. Joining me from Thailand is Joe Stang.
Hi, thanks. Great to be back. Always nice to be on the air.
Joe and I have spent a lot of time working on this, along with some of our other Best in Beer contributors, our critics, number of our writers. We've gone through an elaborate process of blind tasting, as well as considering all of our top scores through the course of the year and all of our regular issues. We'll talk a little bit about our methodology. Before we do that, I just want to mention that our Brewers Retreat, our 2023 10th anniversary Craft Beer and Brewing Brewers Retreat, is sold out. It's sold out. I know it's going to be an experience for the ages. We are so excited about it. If you have missed out on tickets, go to brewersretreat.com. There is a waiting list, and if for some reason some people cancel, there may be spots that become available. There may not, Anyway, just sign up again on the list there if you're really interested in it. If you're a brewery and planning, tickets are going fast for our next Brewery Accelerator event in Fort Collins in February. Go to breweryworkshop.com for more info. I think that's about 50% sold out right now. It's exciting to see some good momentum around that. And of course, as people have heard, we had a fantastic year with a number of, past Brewery Accelerator attendees winning GABF medals and really building a name for themselves in the world of brewing. It's exciting for us to see that. Of course, if you're a brewer wondering how you can send us beer for review and consideration for things like the annual Best in Beer issue, go to beerandbrewing.com, scroll down to the page footer, click on the Help Center link. And right there, you'll find a Help Center article called Getting Your Beer Reviewed in Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine. It's pretty self-explanatory there. It has our editorial calendar, deadlines, shipping info, everything that you need in order to participate in our program. We don't charge people to submit beers. We do hope that you are an all-access subscriber if you are a brewery and submitting beers, but it's not like a competition where you have to pay for individual entries or anything like that. Big thanks to all of our sponsors that make it possible for us to bring you this podcast every week. And of course, it is exciting to see so many increasing and continuing their support in 2023. I know we've got at least 5 sponsors all in for all 52 episodes next year. And the whole thing's almost sold out. It's kind of cool to be at this point of the year and have all our 2023 already figured out. Thank you to all of them. We do put a lot into this in terms of time, travel, and expense, and their support is what makes the difference in this. Let's get down to it. The digital edition of the Best in Beer issue has been emailed to all of our subscribers. Print copies are scheduled to arrive within the next week. On Friday, this Friday, we'll drop the Critics List podcast with Kay Bernat, Stan Hieronymus, Courtney Eisman, Alex Kidd, and of course, Joe. They'll be with me on that episode of the podcast to share their favorite beers, their hot takes, and their growing trends of the past year. It is another don't miss episode on top of this don't miss episode. So of course, tune in for that. Before we get into the winners of each of the categories here in this Best in Beer podcast, let's talk about our methodology. But first, for nearly 30 years, G&D Chillers has set the mark for quality equipment you can rely on. G&D stands above the rest as the only chiller manufacturer that engineers your glycol piping for free. G&D also stands alone as the only chiller manufacturer with an in-house team of installers and engineers with 30 years of real-world field labor experience in breweries, wineries, and distilleries. Contact the Total Glycol System Design experts today at gdchillers.com. Also, still emptying those overflowing waste bins full of low fills, crushed and damaged cans, or undercarbonated beer every canning day. It's time to fill like a pro. Email contact us at probrew.com for more information on Pro Fill can fillers from Pro Brew. Pro Fill can fillers use rotary true counter pressure gravity filling and seaming technology to run at speeds of 100 to 300 cans per minute, with less than 30 parts per billion DO pickup and less than 1% product waste at the filler. Stop wasting perfectly good beer. Email ProBrew at contactus at probrew.com today. ProBrew is a subsidiary of Technoblend, now a ProMock brand. Joe, let's talk about methodology. Explain the way that we do this for everybody.
Well, we've got the survey that goes out, and you all fill it in and answer a bunch of questions. Some of those questions, most of those questions actually you are simply writing in an answer. We're not giving you a multiple choice in a lot of them. Even the ones where there is a couple multiple choice, we're giving you a chance to write in other answers, like, for example, with favorite hop varieties, that kind of thing. But for the most part, you're just telling us what your favorite beers are. You're telling us what your favorite breweries are. And we have to sort through, actually, mostly you, Jamie, have to sort through some kind of messy data to make it work, typos and things. But it all comes together into this, I think, a really kind of unique among readers' choice lists that you'll find anywhere. That these are not just, these really are your favorites.
It's a lot of work going through and cleaning up that data. But we do firmly believe that if we gave you multiple choices for your favorite brewery, then we're going to get the answers that we give you. And, we don't do that in this. We want true reader answers. It takes a little longer for readers to fill out this survey. And my goodness, it's a little bit of work to figure out that somebody gave us an answer of zombie dust when they really mean something like Three Floyds. But having the contextual knowledge that we have, we're able to kind of manually correct that and understand what their intent was in those votings. We don't just throw out the ballots because the chads are hanging. We do our best to figure out what your intent was in this voting, and I think that it makes a difference. At the same time, it's really fun to see what people come up with and how some of these things shift from time to time, or how, there are definitely some get out the vote efforts that we see within that data. It's always fascinating to see how those things push. And then, of course, within our editorial picks, describe the editorial pick process for everybody, Joe.
Well, a chunk of them are coming from our highest scorers during the year in the magazine. Different review panels are in there, depending on the themes of the issues and things. So IPA issue, lager issue, we're getting some 9900 score, 100-point beers. Sometimes beers don't even have to score that high to make it into this conversation. And we just have a healthy respect for our judges and for the blind review process. And then at the end of the year, we get all of your submissions for best in beer tasting, and we do it again blind. And this is me and Jamie and Stan, and we get a couple of our other judges too. And Kate couldn't make it this year, unfortunately.
Usually Kate Bernat.
Yep, Kate couldn't make it this year, unfortunately. But we just are like any other judging table, and we've all got a lot of judging experience. So it's we have a healthy respect for that process, and it's always, first of all, it's an honor to get to do this. The best breweries in the country sending us their, hey, this is the best we got. Good luck, and to get to taste those. So many are so good. And then have to figure out which of those are really going to rise to the top. It is super fun, obviously, and we were very lucky to get to do it. But I just it's a really great process for finding some of the best beers in the world that maybe you wouldn't come to otherwise.
I'll say it again. We believe in scoring everything blind. If you ever see a score for something in Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine and it has been scored blind, that is the only way that we review beers, through that kind of blind scoring process. And it's the exact same process that we then use through our best in beer tasting, even though we don't go through the full scoring process for some of those best in beers, trying to move quickly through all of those submissions. We do it entirely blind amongst the judges because that is the way to find valid opinions about beers that are not connected to preconceived notions about a brewery or what they are doing. Having said that, let's kick off with some reader choice, some charts that came out of our reader survey, and we'll kick it off with your favorite breweries. We break these out by size, and we broke it into some different categories. We actually broke down those categories a little differently this year. The first category is small breweries, fewer than 10,000 barrels per year. Count that down for me from 10 to 1, Joe.
Right. So your top 10 small breweries are: number 10, the Austin Beer Garden Brewery in Austin. Number 9, also in Austin, Jester King. Number 8, in Seattle, Cloudburst. Number 7, in Vermont, you got Hill Farmstead. And number 6, out of Brussels, Cantillon. Out of Chicago, number 5, Off Color. Wayfinder in Portland is number 4. Your number 3 favorite small brewery is the Bierstadt Lagerhaus in Denver. Your number 2 in the Chicago area in Lake Zurich, Illinois is Phase 3. And your favorite small brewery that is fewer than 10,000 barrels per year is Green Cheek in Orange County, California.
Fantastic. Let's talk about small regional breweries. These are 10,000 to 25,000 barrels per year. Count those down from number 10 for us, Joe.
Okay. So from number 10 in Monterey, California, you got Alvarado Street. Number 9 out of Austin, Pint House Brewing and Pint House Pizza. Number 8 out of Seattle, Rubens Brews. Number 7, The Brewery in Placentia, California. Out of Vermont, at number 6 is The Alchemist. Out of Santa Rosa, California, number 5, Hen House. Trillium is number 4 out of the Boston area, Massachusetts. You got Hop Butcher for the World at number 3 at Chicago. Your number 2 small regional brewery is Weldworks in Greeley, Colorado. And your favorite small regional brewery, again, that's 10,000 to 25,000 barrels per year, is Burial in Asheville, North Carolina.
So many fantastic breweries in that list. For mid-sized breweries, mid-sized regional breweries, this is 25,000 to 100,000 barrels per year. Let's start with number 10, Joe. And the number 10 is a brewery that has been just acquired in a deal that closed this week.
That's right. It's Modern Times, San Diego. Number 9, you got Lawson's Finest from Vermont. Number 8 out of Chicago, Half Acre. Love me some Daisy Cutter. Number 7, Other Half out of Brooklyn. Number 6 mid-sized regional brewery is Freem out of Hood River, Oregon. Number 5 out of Seattle is Fremont Brewing. Out of Chicago, another one, Revolution Brewing at number 4. Number 3, Bear Republic, Cloverdale, California. Number 2, another one from Massachusetts, is Tree House. And your number 1 favorite mid-sized regional brewery, again, that's 25,000 to 100,000 barrels per year, is Russian River in Santa Rosa, California.
It's been fun to see some folks get into that category who were in the next lower category. Folks like Other Half have moved up and are cranking out more beer and, bumped up a category. But also nice to see some folks finding bigger audiences that way. Last category is large breweries. This is 100,000 plus barrels per year. And let's start with number 10.
Number 10 out of Bend, Oregon is Deschutes. Number 9, your number 9 favorite large brewery is New Glarus out of Wisconsin and only in Wisconsin. Number 8, Dogfish Head out of Delaware. Number 7, New Belgium in Fort Collins, Colorado. Number 6 out of Portland, Maine, Allagash. Your number 5 favorite large brewery is Founders in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Number 4, Firestone Walker, Paso Robles, California. Number 3 is Lagunitas, Petaluma, California. Now we got 2 left. You can probably guess who they are, but who's going to be first? Number 2, Bell's Brewery out of Kalamazoo, Michigan. And then who's missing? Number 1, your favorite large brewery in the country is Sierra Nevada out of Chico, California.
Let's shift. The next categories that we're going to go through are from what we call Who Brews It Best. Of course, looking at breweries just by size doesn't tell the entire story. Breweries might specialize in specific things. So we ask you and we ask our readers, who are your favorite breweries in each of these categories? Let's start with the favorite American IPA brewery. I should also say that in the magazine, these go 20 deep. We're only going to give you the top 10 on each of these, just as we did for the last, because you need to go read the magazine for the full story on all of this. So we're going to give you the top 10 from each of these. The first in the favorite American IPA brewer category, number 10, Firestone Walker. Number 9, Lagunitas. Number 8, Stone. Number 7, Green Cheek. Number 6 is Bell's. Number 5 is Breakside. Number 4, Sierra Nevada. Number 3, Bear Republic with their entree into the list in the number 3 spot this year. Number 2, from my hometown here, Odell Brewing. And number 1, again, for like, I don't know how many years in a row now, from Santa Rosa, California, is Russian River. Joe, why don't you count down favorite hazy IPA brewers for us?
All right. Your number 10 favorite hazy IPA brewer is The Alchemist out of Vermont. Number 9 is Other Half. Number 8, Monkish. Number 7, Weld Works. Your number 6 favorite hazy IPA brewer is Green Cheek. Number 5, Bear Republic, again, just popping up there on the list high. Number 4, Sierra Nevada. Number 3, Hot Butcher for the World, jumping up to number 3 from number 8 last year. Appearing on the list out of nowhere at number 2, Odell. And your number 1 favorite hazy IPA brewer, again, is Treehouse.
Let's talk about your favorite Saison brewers. In the number 10 spot, Off Color from Chicago. And the number 9 spot, Sante Adarius from Santa Cruz. Number 8, Ommegang. Number 7, Side Project out of St. Louis. Number 6, Funkworks out of Fort Collins, Colorado. Number 5, Allagash out of Maine. Number 4, Hill Farmstead. Number 3, from Austin, Texas, Chester King. Number 2, on the strength of Tank 7, Boulevard Brewing. And in the number 1 spot, Brasserie DuPont with their classic right there. Joe, let's talk Abbey style brewers next.
All right. Well, number 10 out of Quebec, we have Unibrew, or Unibrow, as a lot of us like to say. Number 9, The Lost Abbey. Number 8, Westmalle out of Belgium. They make a few Abbey style beers over there. Number 7, New Belgium out of Fort Collins. Number 6, West Bletrin. Again, the classic. Number 5, another classic, Rochefort. I'm glad to see the Trappist beers appearing on favorite Abbey styles. It's just kind of where they belong. Number 4, Allagash.
This is why we ask the questions in these ways, right? You ask the question in a specific way, you get a specific answer, and here we are.
Yeah, I mean, I'm biased, but you guys are getting it right. Number 4 is Allagash. Number 3 is Chimay. And number 2, Ommegang. And your number 1 favorite brewer of Abbey-style beers is the St. Bernardus Brewery out of West Flanders, Belgium.
Next, let's go into favorite sour or wild ale brewer. Sorry to use the word sour, Joe. Don't hate me for that. In the number 10... the favorite tart or wild ale brewer. Number 10 in the number 10 spot. We have Odell. Number 9, Urban Artifact, brewery that specializes in these sour beers. Number 8, DeGard from Tillamook, Oregon. Number 7, Cascade from Portland, Oregon. Number 6, the brewery in Placentia, California. Number 5, Crooked Stave out of Denver. Number 4, Side Project out of St. Louis. Number 3, Jester King again. Number 2, Russian River Brewing. And in the number 1 spot, once again this year, Cantillon from Brussels. His favorite stout or porter brewer is up next, Joe.
Out of Decorah, Iowa, number 10 is Toppling Goliath. Number 9, favorite stout porter brewer is Bottle Logic. At number 8, we have, again, Bear Republic. Number 7, Firestone Walker, jumping up from number 15 last year. Number 6, Side Project out of St. Louis. Number 5, Deschutes out of Oregon. Number 4, favorite stout of porter brewer is Goose Island out of Chicago. Number 3, North Coast. Your number 2 favorite stout or porter brewer is Founders out of Grand Rapids, Michigan. And your number 1 favorite stout or porter brewer in the world is Guinness.
I'm not wrong. Next up is favorite pale ale brewer. In the number 10 spot, we've got Hot Butcher. Number 9, we have Green Cheek. Number 8, Toppling Goliath with their Pseudo Sue Pale Ale. Number 7, Dale's Pale Ale. Oscar Blues is your favorite pale ale brewer in the number 7 spot. Breakside is number 6. Half Acre is number 5. 3 Floyds is number 4. Number 3 is Bear Republic. Number 2, Odell. And in the number 1 spot, taking this category with a runaway vote. I mean, literally, there's no other category in this entire system of votes by style where one brewer wins by such a margin. It's Sierra Nevada, of course, with their classic pale ale. Like they literally get like 5 times, 6 times the next closest brewery in votes. It's just never, it's not even close. But let's finish this off with favorite lager brewer. Count us down, Joe.
Right. This is a fun one because so many of because lager's been become a bigger thing among smaller breweries, right? And so many of these are localized, so it's interesting to see what people pick out as their favorites. Not always what you'd expect. So number 10, Odell is your 10th favorite lager brewer. Number 9, Augustiner out of Munich. Number 8, Bear Republic. Number 7, Samuel Adams, the Boston Beer Company. Number 6, Green Cheek out of Orange, California. Number 5, Goldfinger, appearing on the list. Number 4, Chuckanut out of Washington State. Great stuff there. Number 3, Jack's Abbey out of the Boston area. Number 2, Dovetail out of Chicago. And your number 1 favorite lager brewer in the country or the world, perhaps, is Bierstadt Lagerhaus.
You can tell there's some brewers that are filling out this list right here. Mm-hmm. Of course, right there. Awesome to see it. Congratulations to all of our brewers in these top 10s for all of these categories. It is no small feat to get mentioned by enough readers in our survey to make the list at all, much less that top 10. Congratulations. Trophies go out to the number 1 spot in every one of those categories. Show them off and be proud. Let's move to favorite beer cities as voted by you. Top 10 in the United States. In the number 10 spot, St. Louis, Missouri. Number 9, Seattle, Washington. Number 8, Santa Rosa, California. Number 7, Portland, Maine. Number 6, Fort Collins, Greeley, Colorado. Number 5 is Portland, Oregon. Number 4 is San Diego, California. Number 3, Denver, Colorado. Number 2, Chicago, Illinois. And in the number 1 spot, again, second year in a row, Asheville, North Carolina. Joe, count down the number 10 international cities for us.
All right. Your number 10 favorite international beer city. And I think there's probably some leeway here, like cities that you've been to and cities that you just really want to get to. We get it. Number 10, Antwerp, Belgium. Number 9, Bruges, Belgium. Number 8 favorite international beer city is Amsterdam in the Netherlands. Number 7, Copenhagen, Denmark. Number 6, Bamberg, Germany. Number 5 top international beer city is London, England. At number 4, beating out London, is Dublin, Ireland. Number 3, Prague in the Czech Republic. Your number 2 favorite international beer city is Brussels, Belgium, while your top pick, whether you've been there or you just need to get there for Oktoberfest, is Munich in Germany.
Those 1 and 2 remain unchanged from last year. Definitely powerhouses in the world of beer cities. Let's talk about your favorite beer bars. Again, we've got a list 20 deep of your favorite beer bars in the magazine. We're going to count down the top 10, starting with number 10, the Map Room in Chicago, Illinois. Number 9, Yard House, of course, a chain with various locations. Number 8, Novari Res, a place with just 1 location in Portland, Maine. Number 7, another spot, Flying Saucer, with a number of various locations. Number 6, another with just 1, Church Key in Washington, D.C. Number 5, the classic Monk's Cafe in Philadelphia. Number 4, Bitter Creek Ale House in Boise, Idaho, jumping up on the list. Number 3, Tap and Handle from my hometown in Fort Collins, Colorado. Number 2, Toronado, with a couple of West Coast locations. And in the number 1 spot this year, out of Chicago, the classic Hop Leaf. Next up is our Reader's Choice for top 50 beers of 2022. But first,
looking for innovation in your next beverage breakthrough? Think outside the puree box and let your brand stand out with Old Orchard's Craft Concentrate Blends. Even smoothie seltzers can benefit from the extra boost of flavor and color. Old Orchard is based in the greater Grand Rapids, Michigan area, also known as Beer City, USA, and supplies craft beverage categories ranging from beer, wine, and cider to seltzer, spirits, and kombucha. To join the core of Old Orchard's brewing community, learn more at oldorchard.com/brewer. Also, packaging beer can be a daunting task, but buying cans shouldn't be. American Canning provides packaging supplies at competitive prices in order quantities catered to craft. Think single truckloads and a half-height pallets rather than million can minimums. For a smooth packaging experience, also consider their ultra-compact single-operator canning machines. Pricing begins at $25,000 with quick 6 to 8 week lead times on most equipment. American Canning exists to help share your craft in cans. Learn more about their ecosystem of solutions at americancanning.com.
All right, let's dive right into our Reader's Choice Top 50. Of course, this whole list is 50 deep, but we are only going to give you the top 25. And once again, I'm going to sound like a broken record when I say it, but go back to the magazine and go check this out. Read the full list in the magazine itself. Number 25, North Coast Old Rasputin. Number 24, Treehouse Julius IPA. Number 23 is Highland Park Timbo Pils. Number 22, New Belgium Fat Tire. 21, Firestone Walker Pivo Pils. Thank you. Thank you. Number 20, Odell Lagerado. Number 19 is Lawson's Finest Sip of Sunshine. Number 18, Breakside Wanderlust. Number 17, Bourbon County Stout from Goose Island. Number 16, Pilsner Urquell. Number 15 is Half Acre Daisy Cutter. 14 is Russian River Blind Pig. In the 13th spot, we've got the Alchemist Heady Topper IPA. Weldworks Juicy Bits is there in number 12. Freem Pilsner is number 11. And Joe, why don't you give us the top 10 Reader's Choice favorite beers of 2022?
At number 10, we've got from Bierstadt Lagerhaus, the Slow Pour Pils. At number 9, we have Saison Dupont from Brasserie Dupont. At number 8, Sierra Nevada Celebration. It's that time of year. Number 7, Guinness Extra Stout. At number 6, Allagash White. And for your top 5 of your top 50 beers of 2022, Bell's Two-Hearted IPA. At number 4, Bear Republic Racer 5 appearing on our list. At number 3, Russian River Pliny the Elder. Number 2, Odell IPA jumping up from number 32. And your number 1 favorite beer, Reader's Choice, is Sierra Nevada Pale Ale.
What can I say? Our readers have fantastic taste. All right, now we're going to move away from Reader's Choice for the moment and talk about Editor's Picks with our top 20 beers of the year, the top 20 beers of 2022, as determined in a couple of different ways. As we mentioned before, our primary focus on this is our top scorers throughout our blind review process throughout the year. And so, beers that were their top scorers in each category were instantly thrown into our broader pool for consideration for this. And then, of course, we tasted beers into that same consideration pool through our tasting for the best in beer issue. It was hard, especially in some of these categories. If we had top scorers that are already there, like for example, we do an entire issue of stout, like for a stout to get in through the blind tasting process for the best in beer issue was really hard. And in fact, I don't think any of them actually made it in through that process. I might have to correct myself later on. Or IPA was a tough one. Again, once we've gone through an entire issue, tasting hundreds and hundreds of IPAs, we're certainly going to give precedence in that kind of scenario to those beers that scored best with our judges. Nonetheless, some things we did discover some, quite a few interesting, creative, mind-blowing, and captivating beers from this process. But the first beer on our list is one that our judges selected with a perfect 100 score. Why don't you tell us about Oud Beersel Oudgoes Vie?
Right. Well, this is the phrase that we use in the write-up is this is one of the most award-winning beers on the planet over the past 20 years. And that's because Gerd Christians, he enters the beer in a lot of competitions and he wins. And again, respect for the blind judging process. This is essentially a perfect beer. And it's one of my favorites also because compared to some of the other beers that maybe people talk about more, it's accessible. You can find it and it's relatively affordable. So to have this, kind of stroll into our blind panel and get 100 is no surprise to me. I've been drinking it for years. So if you haven't, I think you should check it out. There's also, people associate Outbursts with the Bone Brauerei, but Gerd is doing his own thing, and he's a blender in his own right, and doing increasingly creative things with things like green walnuts and and other fruits, but he never has stopped dialing in the flagship beers and Creek. And so this is a beer that is good enough to be on this list any year. This just happens to be the year.
A perfect 100. The next beer on our list also scored a perfect 100. Fonta Flora Brewery out of Nebo, North Carolina, based in a beautiful farm out there in Nebo. Fonta Flora, the beers, we've written about them a number of times. Of course, they've been on the cover of our Brewing Industry Guide. And, we've written about them in the court, even within the scope of writing about local ingredients like a Bloody Butcher corn. They've always taken a very creative approach to ingredients. It's actually interesting that this beer is more down the middle of the plate to use in a World Series analogy, because it's ongoing right now as we're talking about this. This beer is a bourbon barrel aged stout, and it's funny when I look at the judges on this. It was the judges who scored this one through our blind tasting panel were Patrick Dawson, a known author in that kind of beer spaces, and Stan Hieronymus was the other judge on this panel. Both of them, I specifically put them on barrel aged beers without adjuncts, knowing that would be in their wheelhouse. And yet, this beer stood above a lot of fantastic beers, a lot of really incredible beers. And it stood out with this kind of clarity and tension. They managed to pull off both of this, kind of idea of sweetness without cloying, and also just these hints of character that don't overwhelm, like Venice red fruit, a little nutty chocolate. But the way that they've pulled it all together with this kind of light honey sweetness and this kind of dry nuttiness that plays in this tension against it, just made for such an artful experience. It's no wonder that it scored a 100 with some highly qualified, very experienced judges in this kind of category. And even as I've gone back to it since to think about it some more, it just captivates me every single time. What's next on our list, Joe?
Well, this is a brewery that we've written about in our Brewing Industry Guide, and I think probably we can hope to see more of them in our Craft Beer and Brewing magazine as well, because we'd love to get into Ben Howe's head and how he brews lagers. So this is from Other Lands in Bellingham, Washington, the Halududa Special. And this is a Polish-style Pilsen. This is one that came out of the Best in Beer blind tasting, and it was a no-doubter at the table. It was just, we all loved it. And it's one of the things that makes it stand out is those Lublin hops. I love Polish hops, and Lublin has this lovely, pillowy floral quality to it, almost like an herbal tea or something. It just adds something, a different dimension than you get, for example, from a typical Czech Pilsner most of the time. So it's Czech-ish. It's light, 4.4% ABV. It drinks so easily. It's got enough bitterness to it. It's plenty of bitterness, really. A crisp frame, and it's just so easy to drink. Really delicious, compelling aroma, really well made. Enough malt to hold it all together. Good Czech malt. And also, maybe we should mention we've got a recipe for it, thanks to Ben and Carolina for this beer in the magazine. So definitely check it out, and definitely get up to Bellingham and drink some lager at Other Lands if you get the chance.
In talking about this, I was just inspired and had to go grab the last bottle that I have of it out of the fridge, the one bottle left over from this tasting. And we fell in love with Other Lands when we were out there in 2021 on that podcast tour, and we had gone out thinking, Chuckanut, we've got to get to Chuckanut and go talk about lagers. And that was our goal. And when we got there, of course, it lived up to every expectation. But every brewer in town was also like, have you been to Other Lands? Have you been to Other Lands? Have you guys been to Other Lands yet? And this is our MO. Go in with an idea, but then just listen to brewers, because brewers everywhere we go will tell us who we need to talk to, who they like, where they like to go drink. And we follow those leads. That is our editorial process. And that's why we try to get around to so many places. And everyone in Bellingham was talking about Other Lands, and for good reason. They're doing something special there. It's exciting to be able to highlight what they're doing. So Joe, what's next on our list? We're going to go to an entirely different part of the country, going down to Atlanta, Georgia next.
Well, this is a brewery that I figured eventually it would be a Best in Beer pick, and when it happened, it would be a lager. And no, in fact, from Halfway Crooks out of Atlanta, it's the Sanguine. It's what do you call it? A blonde ale, a hoppy blonde ale. That's what it is. It's got a distinctive strut to it. It's not, we're being into beer. We drink plenty of IPA and tropical and citrus and everything. And this one has much more like noble forward character to it. But it's really hoppy and it's bitter and it's dry. And it's just, it was another one at the table. We're just like, yeah, we love this. We don't know what it is, but it's good. And when it turned out to be Halfway Crooks and not a lager, that was like kind of a double surprise. Stan and I are at the table and we both like bitterness. So maybe we're giving away like the secret plans to how to get on this list. I don't know. Maybe not. It's not that easy. But there's so much more going on with this beer. This expressive fermentation that definitely reminded me of Brasserie de la Seine when we were tasting it. Some fruity esters and this zesty hop character, and it all comes together beautifully into this just highly drinkable beer with a ton of character. And just can't believe I haven't been there yet. I'd love to get to Halfway Crooks, drink a bunch of beer, and do it again the next day.
We haven't done a podcast with him yet. It's a good reminder. I need to book a trip to Atlanta and get the heck down there. Just fantastic. And of course, we've appreciated the contributions from those guys that did a great story with us on brewing Belgian style Pilsner and their Pintje. I mean, so many of these beers that we've had from them this year have just been real standouts. Next on our list, going back to that greater Chicago area, Phase 3 P3 Czech style dark lager. You may be forgiven if you would assume that Phase 3 might make this list for a barrel-aged stout or even a hazy IPA. Both of those are the kinds of things that they spend a lot of time, they've spent a lot of time honing and specializing in. But, the lager program at Phase 3 is this kind of sneaky thing. Part of it is that, like, if you're going to make lagers in the Chicago area, they better be good. Like, they have to be damn good. And if they're not damn good, then no one's going to pay attention to them. So many amazing lager brewers in that broader area. Of course, we've talked about art history. In this very issue, there's a breakout brewer story on art history and what they're doing in lagers. Dovetail, of course, has been a past beer of the year for craft beer and brewing. Their Hellas is just sublime, and the entire program, I mean, it's just really, really incredible. Within Lake Zurich, we had it last year. One of our beers of the year also came from Lake Zurich, but it came from Roaring Table. I don't know what's in the water right there in Lake Zurich, but something special is happening right there. Nonetheless, our blind judges absolutely loved this Czech style dark lager. Of course, the entire style is on the up and up. We're seeing more and more examples of it from breweries all over the place. But this one had that really nice, floral and spicy hop edge. Was there. It wasn't over the top. It all pulled together in this beautiful kind of cohesion. Those dark notes were a lot like I described it as more insinuation than enunciation. They were there. It just pulled together in this, this kind of beautiful way. Maybe a touch roastier, than purely Czech iteration of this style of beer. But of course, for our American palates, it was absolutely right there. I don't think this is anything that anyone will ever light up the trade boards for. Not that there's really much of a world for trading beer anymore. Thankfully, that all seems to have kind of petered out in terms of profit seeking and, the other weirder aspects of that. But nonetheless, have your regular trading partner from Chicago throw these in as some extras and you will not be disappointed. Next on the list is an IPA. There's not a lot of IPAs in this list, Joe. I mean, there are some, but I mean, if IPA is 40% of the craft beer world, it's not 40% of our best in beer list. But Highland Park Competition IPA. This one stood out through our best in beer tasting. And I should say, It was no small feat to do that because we were biased against any IPA sent to us. All of those breweries that got my reminder for beers to submit to this read my exact comments about it. Don't send us IPA. The chance of your IPA making it through a tasting in this kind of context and rising above all of our top scoring IPAs from the IPA issue, I mean, you're basically looking at a statistical anomaly to even be considered or even make it there. But Highland Park and their IPA approach rose above and hit that kind of point where we just had to talk about it. Number one, and I think we should all get this out there, is a couple years ago, Highland Park started making all of their IPAs with lager yeast. And so while this is not technically a cold IPA because there's not an adjunct component to the malt, and that's not their exact approach to it, they are pursuing that kind of colder or warm lager yeast fermentation in a way to drive esters down and capture this beautiful, sleek, we could call it crisp kind of hop flavor. Certainly not as dry as, those lighter lagers or West Coast Pilsners, but such a beautifully structured beer that allows that hop character to shine without having to overdo the hop character in that and get into some of the more unpleasant levels of hop character in that. This one, has all of those pieces, pine forest and tropical fruit, that bit of nostalgic grounding. But there's also this kind of beautiful minimalism at play where, it leaves that open space, that kind of negative space that allows you to fill in those details, and creates a beautiful experience in IPA, that feels full without overdoing it. I'm a huge fan of what Highland Park is doing in the IPA space, and this beer, even though this was really you and Stan pushing for it through that tasting process and getting it in there, what a phenomenal beer.
I would also just add, definitely check out the issue because we've got a really cool sort of rumination on this topic of using lager yeast for ales and ale yeast for lagers from Sam Tierney, the Firestone Walker Propagator Brewery in Venice, California. And it's a very pragmatic, kind of historically oriented view of it. And I think no matter how you learned about beer, it's a mind better to think about ales made with lager yeast or lagers made with ale yeast. But from a pragmatic professional view, it makes some sense. And we're seeing that obviously with cold IPAs, and we're finding out more IPA brewers that are doing it too. So pretty interesting stuff for sure.
If you're that kind of brewer that's like, well, you can't call it an IPA if you made it with lager yeast, just read Sam's article and then come talk to me. We'll continue with our editor's picks for best beers of 2022 in a sec. But first, ABS Commercial is a full-service brewery outfitter proud to offer brew houses, tanks, and small parts to brewers across the country. They stock equipment ranging from 3 barrels to 90 barrels and offer custom-designed equipment up to 900 barrels. Contact one of their brewery consultants today at sales@abs-commercial.com to discuss your brewery project. ABS Commercial, we are brewers. Also, craft the perfect pour with superior fruit from the perfect puree. Picked at the peak of ripeness, the fruit is pureed and frozen for optimal fresh flavor and color. But don't just take their word for it. Experience flavor firsthand by curating your own complimentary sample box at perfectpuree.com/beer. That's perfectpuree, PUREE.com/beer. Samples are complimentary for brewing professionals only. So the next one on our list is someone I just did a podcast with the other week.
Sapwood Cellars. Yeah, the two authors, Scott Janish, who wrote the new IPA, and Michael Tonsmere, who wrote American Sour Beers. If you don't know the story already, they got together and started a brewery 4 or 5 years ago called Sapwood Cellars in Columbia, Maryland. And when homebrewers and writers start breweries, it could go a bunch of different directions. But these guys have just this kind of super curious, experimental, scientific approach to things, constantly tinkering and playing with things and dialing things in. And they've been brewing for a long time, even if they were award-winning homebrewers before. They know what they're doing, and the beers coming out of there are really good, even if they don't make it too far out of that region. So this was a beer. I visited there to talk to them for breakout brewer profile. And this was one of the beers that they opened. And when I tasted it, I knew already it was one of the best beers I was going to have all year. And I told them, you guys need to send this in. Like, it's really good. So they sent that and a couple other things in for the best in beer tasting. And again, blind tasting, but there was, there wasn't a lot of doubt about this beer. It's called Neologism. It's a mixed fermentation beer aged in, it's essentially a, tart blonde ale aged in gin barrels, for months. And then, so you've got, you're using different mixed cultures there. And so they don't necessarily have names for all of them, but they keep track. What makes this one really different, although it's not, I think it's a growing trend, dry hopping mixed fermentation beers. And so this is dry hopped with Cascade Cryo and Simcoe Cryo. And it just all came together so beautifully. You get those bright citrus notes and tropical notes, but they integrate beautifully with the pineapple-like Brett and the botanicals that are still hanging around from the gin barrels. And it's none of it's too much. The bitterness is there, but it's not overdone. The acidity is just at this really drinkable level. It's 5.5% ABV. So this is not a huge bruiser of a beer, despite how long it took to make. It's just incredibly complex, yet incredibly drinkable and beautifully integrated. It's a really nice beer. And the cool thing, too, is it integrates their expertise as well. Michael Townsmere is the sour beer guy, and Scott Inish is the IPA guy. So you've got this tart beer that's dry hopped, and it just really works. And I'm really excited to see what else comes out of there in the next years.
When I was there a couple weeks ago, I had more beers in the same kind of vein. A beautiful beer. There was a hazy pale ale wort that had been whirlpooled and then dropped into a barrel with mixed culture, didn't rinse the barrel, put it straight in, picked up that mixed culture. And then once that had fermented, they then dry hopped it again. And so it had this like hazy IPA meets mixed culture, Brett kind of and wild sack character. Absolutely mind-blowing, phenomenally delicious. And I love this kind of this mixing of the streams, this playing between, coloring outside the lines and finding new spaces for beer that Sapwood is doing. It's incredibly creative, but not just creative in a, oh, that's interesting kind of way, creative in a, holy crap, I love drinking this kind of way. And this completely works, and I will tell you this too, Joe. They had a Tom Kha IPA.
Ah, cool.
That was phenomenally good. Absolutely love it. Some really creative brewing. So stoked on Sapwood Cellars, and I'm obviously super excited to feature them here.
Definitely get there.
One of our favorite.
Get there to visit. I mean, it's not easy because Columbia, Maryland is kind of in between our town, so you can get to it if you're visiting Baltimore. It's more of a haul from DC, but it can be done. Or if you just, maybe you can figure out your stopover in BWI because it's a pretty manageable taxi ride from Baltimore, Washington International Airport. So however you do it, you should definitely try to get in there for a beer because the locals there are getting to enjoy most of this stuff.
Absolutely incredible. So good. And there's still so much room for where they're going to go with this. Can't wait to see where they go next. Next up on our list is a very well awarded beer. A beer that has won one World Beer Cup and 3 GABF medals so far. They finally sent some to us for our reviewers to taste this year in our lager issue, and Figueroa Mountain Danish Red Lager earned its spot as the top lager in its category there and naturally became a shoo-in for us to feature here. If you want to learn more about some of this process, you can listen to the podcast I did with Kevin Ashford, their brewmaster. I don't know, I guess that was 2021, summer of 2021. Really just phenomenal work there across the lager category, and even pale ales, and across the entire spectrum. There's a reason that they've won Brewery of the Year awards through GABF in the past. Just a beautiful thing. I think the other thing I want to point out about this beer is in talking to Kevin. This is a beer that they continue to change, and they've made major changes to it after it has won medals. It's something that they haven't rested on their laurels with, and they are continuing to try to make it better, to tighten it up, and to make it exactly what it should be at any given point when people are drinking it. So much character, and you can either enjoy it just from a 10,000-foot viewpoint, or you can drill right down and find in all those specifics. It's just something that is that's absolutely beautiful, no matter what level you want to enjoy it on. And of course, we did taste it again through that Best in Beer tasting process, just because I wanted you, Stan, and everyone else to taste it in that process. It's a delicious beer.
Absolutely, yeah. It's one of those where the panel will rate something really highly, and then you taste it and be like, yep, that is really good. Yep, exactly. Good pick. That's done. Easy. Yeah, that was a no-brainer.
Yeah, the next one's scored, I think, a 99 by our blind panel is Wallenpaupach Holly Hefeweizen. Hefeweizens are, they're not typically a beer that we find on these lists. They're beers that, of course, lots of people enjoy, but it's hard to find that specific Hefeweizen that just rises above Hefness, like there's almost like this line of just Hefness, right? It's a Hef, you can enjoy it. They're good beers, but they're just not those beers that strike you in a specific way that says, holy crap. Of course, in the past, we've included Sierra Nevada and Weinstefan's Braupact, and Live Oak Hefeweizen is another one that has made this list in the past. Just an incredible beer. So it's in great company. This one is, maybe strays from a little bit from that classical structure of the other two. Some light tropical fruit, a little bit of floral lavender, fluffy malt, light peppery phenols. It never gets off into that like crazy banana land that, a lot of hefts can go to, thankfully. Just keeps it focused on that kind of tropical floral orientation. But with, again, that kind of structure, that's, I think, what we look for when we find that much fruit flavor in a beer. It's got to have that piece to play off against. And usually that's, either a hop or a phenol structure. In this case, I think it's some blend of both, but those phenols are very well and tightly controlled so that it's not necessarily clove. It really comes across more just peppery, almost to clove without just feeling overwhelming or, like I'm in a goth club circa 1992. Fantastic beer. An incredible one. Excited to include that one on the list. Up next, this is a super weird one, Joe. Cellarmaker training binds. What a great story in this one. Training binds, of course, is a pint house recipe, and yet Pint House, along with Green Cheek, Cellarmaker, Cloudburst, Alvarado Street, and Highland Park, they've got this kind of six-way collaboration, thing that they do. And in this funny thing, because we're all friends and because they respect what we do, they've been sending us, everyone's been sending us their iterations of each of these collabs that they do. And so last year it was the You've Got Pale collaboration, which was a Cellarmaker recipe. And we just blind judged them for all of them and gave them the results of whose was best. We did the same thing with training binds this year, and it all coincided with our IPA issue. And so we were able to put it all through our blind review process and score each one of these, which was fascinating. So the idea is take one recipe and then let's explore what happens with one recipe when brewers who are getting their yeast and hops and malt from different suppliers take that recipe and create their own version of it. This whole project then becomes an exploration of what those specific ingredient choices, what your house choices for some of those ingredients can mean. And as we have tasted and seen through this entire thing, it's incredible how little a recipe might matter in and of itself. And it's amazing to see just how much the ingredient choice of the brewer and their technical approach and process to extracting what they want out of that recipe can actually do for those finished beers. And so in this case, strangely enough, it was Cellarmaker's edition of Training Binds that ended up topping our judges' score sheet with a score of 99. Kind of an interesting upset. Strange also because another iteration of this project that they did with Timbo Pills from Highland Park resulted in Pint House winning a medal for for Highland Park's recipe of Timbo. And so it's almost strikingly, karmic now for Cellar Maker to win for a Pint House recipe. What a fun project. What a cool way to collaborate. What a nice way to explore what the impacts of these inputs on finished beers and what that can mean. From what I understand, Cellar Maker maybe diverged from the primary recipe with a little bit extra dry hop. At least that's what some of the other competitors are saying in this.
Did they cheat? Is that
I think cheat is such a.
I mean, people talk about collaboration, Jamie. People talk about collabs are a thing of craft beer, right? It's an important part of craft beer doing collaborations, and this makes other collaborations look like they're not very collabby at all. Actually, when you get some of the smartest brewers, especially when it comes to hops in the country, who happen to be all friends. And so there's this spirit of cooperation where they're taking turns to do each other's recipe, but there's also that competition there that's real. And so how are you not going to get some great beer out of that? And then this was just a joy to drink. It was really cool to taste the fruits of that sort of unique collective of brewers.
We got looped into that entire process too, because I reached out, of course, to Joe Morfeld at Pint House, just to ask him for a recipe, because hey, if their group can collab on this, wouldn't it be fun if we can let everybody collab and make their own? And of course, we have a recipe for Training Bind's Hazy IPA in the issue. Subscribers, go in, access that, check it out, brew your own version of it. Joe, you got the email that Joe Morfeld sent. It's kind of fascinating to see how, what the framework was that everyone had to approach this recipe from. The things that Pint House finds important, the way that they stress those things, because it was a very narrative recipe that we have then, moved into our more, kind of structured technical form.
Yeah, it's a cool peek behind the curtain for us, because I think, we talk to brewers all the time, but you usually can't be there. When you're observing, something changes, right? So if you're there, two brewers know you're listening, conversation is going to change. But if you're getting this email between them when it was just brewers, you're getting this sort of a lot of shorthand and jokes and a story, like a narrative almost behind it too. And so it's kind of cool because a lot of them already know what they're talking about. They do know what they're talking about, obviously, but they're starting from a different point. And so to read and get this peek into that was really cool. And we hope we got some of that across in our write-up and the recipe in the magazine. Check it out.
Love Cellar Maker, of course, love Pint House, love all the breweries that are collaborating in that. And of course, you've seen others in the past and even in this current issue in our top 20 beers of the year. They're all no strangers. In fact, they've all been there, haven't they? Like Pint House, Green Cheek, Cellar Maker, Cloudburst, Alvarado Street, Highland Park. All of them have been past beers of the year, or currently in this issue, like Highland Park. I don't know why I didn't have that research at my fingertips and just had to figure that out. But what a cool thing. Anyway, nonetheless, the next beer we drop back into a kind of, I'm not going to call it a throwback because they've been here for years. It's Hop and Frog Den Haag Old Ale.
Yeah, this was cool, man. I was just one of those. This was out of blind tasting for the Best in Beer issue, and one of those beers where it's like, okay, we love this. This is really delicious. This is huge character. This is fun to taste. Like, who is it? And when you find out, it's like Hop and Frog. That's fun. Like that was kind of delightful for me. Hop and Frog is this name from like the Duck Rabbit age of bottle shares. Like the aughts. I was living in Brussels at the time, like 15 years ago, but doing these rate beer gatherings, and it was really fun. And Hop and Frog is like one of those bombers that somebody might show up with from the States, and so I don't get to drink a lot of Hop and Frog beers, and so that was kind of fun to have that come out. And there's also an old schoolness about the character of it. There's an assertive bitterness there that has been allowed to age. This is a barrel-aged beer. There's a ton of malt depth to it, and there was just so much character packed into it that was just a really, really fun beer to taste. You've got so much malt depth. You've got all the kinds of malt depth. So you're getting caramel, but you're also getting dark fruits and some cherry and chocolate. But none of it was stepping on the other elements. It all just came together really, really well. Another comfort blanket type of beer where it reminded me of Christmas cake, and yet it was not a cloying beer thanks to that big bitterness, and it was somehow all balanced together. Such a fun beer to taste. So thank you to Hoppenbrock for sending some beer in for the tasting, and it's cool that we could honor you for this beer because it's really delicious.
A huge beer too, 16.8%, not barrel aged. Alcohol plays such a nice role, but a well-structured role. It doesn't feel hot, even though it's clearly a big beer. Let's avoid that stupid cliche of, oh, you can't even taste the alcohol in this. It's not that alcohol is there, but it plays this kind of artful role in balancing the rest of those flavors and that kind of big malt and some of that sweetness. Like, it's there and it's perfectly placed to do exactly what it needs to do. A phenomenal beer. Next beer on our list and our editor's picks for best beers of 2022. Good Words, Moments Before Impending Doom. This one's a barrel-aged barley wine. Definitely a spicy rum barrel-aged character to this one. It was top scorer in our in our barley wine scoring earlier this year with our blind panel. I went back to it because I had an extra bottle left of it as I was writing this up for our issue. Of course, Good Word, all of us in the beer world have been tasting a lot of Good Words beer because Todd from Good Word sends a lot of beer out. He's looking for feedback. He's one of those brewers that's constantly trying to get better at what he does and wants that honest feedback from everybody. But as a side result of that, like, a lot of us are very familiar with Good Word because, again, it sends a lot of beer out there and to a lot of folks. And so we also have touchstones to talk about that with each other. This one, of course, went in front of our blind panel. They had no idea what the context was. They were tasting this along with other barrel-aged barley wines. And this kind of spicy character to it just was captivating. Maybe that kind of holiday like dessert spice with an almost curry undertone, without feeling weird. Didn't feel like a joke. It just felt like all of these pieces fit together so nicely. It's a little bit sweet, but it's not exceedingly sweet. It's certainly not one of these high Play-Doh finishing, just win a bottle share by making it 15 to 20 Play-Doh finishing gravity kinds of beers. It is thoroughly balanced as this kind of spice character offers that drying element amongst the sweetness. And so so it was there also with its own character as this builds this big broad idea of flavor without it being overwhelming or being too much. It was a very classic and beautiful, well done, lightly spiced beer. And of course, thank you to Todd for sharing a recipe for brewing it. If you would like to brew it yourself, the recipe is right there in Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine. Next up on our list, Joe, this was an IPA. Finally, we're getting some more IPAs. We're this deep into the list, and we're only on IPA number 2.
It's a hazy IPA.
But this one came out of, it's a hazy IPA, and it came out of Alaska, Fairbanks, Alaska, even. Black Spruce.
Yeah, well-known both hazy IPA, Fairbanks, Alaska.
What I loved about this one, and I shouldn't say what I loved because our blind panel is the one that selected this as one of their favorites of the year in the IPA issue in that hazy IPA category. Really big tropical character, everything that you want out of that hazy IPA, thick guava, passion fruit, nectar, orange smoothie, these big characters, all these things that are associated with heft and weight, all these things which in less deft fermentations can just become sludgy or, overwhelming. And within the scope of this, of Black Spruce's Aromadome, they felt nimble. They were, I described it as like, vivacious and sprightly fruits, honeydew melon, cucumber, yuzu. Like they had this almost like light, refreshing, edge on some of these bigger tropical characters that just gave it this lightness and brightness that helped everything convey so beautifully. It was really fun to drink this beer, to explore all of these flavors without getting weighted down, and also with, a little bit of that light, spicy, back note, maybe some peppery arugula, a little bit of like dank weed, some earth, just kind of grounding these fruitier flavors in this kind of broad spectrum approach to hazy IPA. Just beautifully done. Loved it. I mean, the quality of ingredients is fantastic, and the quality of execution was just phenomenal. I'm really excited to see what comes next out of Black Spruce, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, first beers they've ever sent to us, to make a splash like that. I mean, you've got my attention. What's next? Can't wait to see what's coming.
For sure, it was really lovely beer.
Next up in our best beers of 2022, Creature Comforts Crop Colors Pink Dawn. Talk to me about this beer, Joe.
Well, I think this kind of, I think the process of some of these beers is really fascinating. I'm talking about mixed fermentation beers with fruit. I think we all know there was a big, maybe people overinvested in mixed fermentation in barrels some years ago. And then I'm not talking necessarily about Creature Comforts here. I'm just saying in general, right? So breweries are sitting on some barrel stock sometimes, and then they don't always maybe know what they're going to do with it. And so the story of this beer, whether it was planned or not, I have no idea. But I like thinking about how maybe it could have just been, they figured it out one step at a time. So you had some tart beer, some beer that first went into barrels back in 2018, right? In barrels for a year or two. Then it goes on to some local grape pomace for 6 months. Okay, sure. And then on to some local strawberries for 8 weeks. Apparently a lot of strawberries, given the beautiful flavor of this beer. And then into some bottles with a little bit of homemade lavender simple syrup. Because sure, why not? That the brewers made themselves. Yeah, I mean, that is craft, man. And the product just is a really beautiful thing to drink in the end. No matter how it was made, no matter how it came together, no matter how planned out or not it was from the beginning, the way these things turn out, I think, is really fascinating, especially when it works like this, because this is a stunning beer. The nose, it's like a nice orange gold color, some surprising foam on it. Always happy when you get foam on a mixed firm beer, right? And then there's just like this seedy, pulpy, mashed up strawberry, like you were baking a pie at home or something, and it was real strawberry in those there, not jam and not puree. It was just like fat, fleshy strawberries. And then the acidity was gentle. It was tart, but it wasn't sharp. And there's this like fleshy berry middle through it. And then these little peppery elements from the fermentation and yeast that drive interest and were totally just accenting the fruit, but in balance with everything. So the other elements, grapes and herbal character and everything was just sort of there as complements supporting that fruit. And it worked so well that I was forced to consider maybe that was the master plan all along to make this thing. Anyway, Pink Dawn, beautiful beer from Creature Comforts out of Athens, Georgia. That's 3 Georgia beers in this list, right? Wow.
Is that? Wow. Look at that. Yeah, you're right. Right. Good word, halfway crooks, and now Creature Comforts. Man, out there. Fantastic to see that. Of course, Blake, the head of that beer program for Creature Comforts, Blake Tyers, has always made phenomenal beers. It's exciting to see this one, hit here with you all through this blind tasting. I knew what it was as you were tasting it, and when I saw our judges respond to it in that kind of way, it just made me feel a little warm inside. Very, very cool. Next up was one that our judges, put onto this list through our stout issue this year. Wiley Roots Vanilla Homonym. Super, and just what an incredible beer. Wiley Roots this year had a score of 99 for their barrel aged stout Kryptonym. And this vanilla homonym scored a perfect 100 with our judges. And it did it on the strength of focus. This is not the thickest vanilla stout out there. This was not just the sweetest and most silky and biggest bodied, of those stouts. I think we're entering a post-thick world. Maybe I'm a little early on this, but I can see it happening. I can see us transitioning out of that thickness is top ratedness. Maybe the untapped crowd is not quite there yet, but I can see this as the eventual future. And I think Wiley Roots is on top of that. It definitely privileged the idea of cohesive flavor, of pulling together everything that you want in that stout. The chocolate, that roasted nuts, little bit like, higher milk chocolate flavors, deeper dark chocolate flavors, little, cocoa, that coffee roast character, pulling that all together with that kind of softer vanilla into this cohesive whole, just made for a phenomenal beer. Rather than cranking up sweetness, they've just focused on honing all these pieces together. And it's just a beautiful beer. Again, not the thickest out there, but definitely for our judges, one of the best. Next up, barley wine, Joe. You all responded to this one through our blind tasting for best in beer.
Right. Thinking about places where, what's going on? Then there must be something in the water. What's the deal with Decorah, Iowa, Anyways, this is Pulpit Rock in collaboration with Horace Aged Ales. The beer is How We Get Along. And I know this may be hard for some to believe, but not everyone spends a lot of time tasting barrel-aged imperial stouts and barley wines. So the idea of combining them into the same beer, blending them, may not be intuitive for everyone. In fact, kind of on the surface, to me, strikes me as odd. Of course, if you think about it, it makes perfect sense from a sensory standpoint, especially barrel-aged beers. Some imperial stouts have those fruit characters. Some imperial stouts, or some barley wines get that roasty edges. So it makes sense. It makes perfect sense. Then when you taste one, it's like, oh yeah, that makes perfect sense. And this was one of those where I didn't fully know what it was, I think, when we were tasting it necessarily, but it's just that naughty, decadent richness there. So much body to it that makes these kinds of beers so fun these days. I do think we need a better name for these imperial style barley wine blends. I don't know what that is. I think black wine is kind of edgy. That'd be kind of cool.
Don't call it stouty wine. It's the worst name I've seen anyone use
stouty wine for
this kind of. Oh god, okay. It's just the worst.
No, it's going to catch on.
Now. It's got. Black wine sounds awesome.
Kind of edgy. I like it. I don't know. I've heard black barley wine, but that doesn't necessarily have stout in it. I think a black barley wine. So I don't know.
Yeah.
But this, just the legs on this thing, like you just before of course you can smell it immediately, but the legs on it just warn you what's about to happen, and there's just this gestalt there, this greater than the sum of its parts combination of dark chocolate elements and rich, toothsome dark fruit that all works together really well. And then there's plenty of alcohol, but it's not punching you in the head either. It's there just to support everything else. I was getting like chocolate covered figs and cherries, and just it would be a great after Christmas kind of sipping by the fireside deal. Such a cliche. I hate that I just said that, but I did. I said it and I meant it. Stan was ready to take this beer and pour it over his blue corn pancakes. That was what he declared. And we were just sort of happy to sip it and let it do its work on our brains. It was a lovely beer from Pulpit Rock out of Decorah, Iowa.
Next up on our list is a Pils.
So this is a place I would love to visit. This is Twin Barns Brewery in Meredith, New Hampshire. It just looks like a lovely place to be. The brewery's in an old barn near the shores of Lake Winnipesaukee. Sounds like a place I would have gone to camp as a kid, although I never went to camp, but I always wanted to. I saw the movies. And it just looks like that kind of place. It's cool. The brewer's name's Randy Booth. He studied journalism, so we like that. But he went on to become a professional brewer. He's from that area, but he brewed at Wiley Roots in Greeley, in Colorado, among other places. And then he went home to be a head brewer at Twin Barns. And so in my critics picks, I talk about German stout pilsners. So I'm happy to see more of them coming around and having this sort of evident hop bitterness to them. And this is one of those. It's got the Hallertau Mittelfrüh and Czech Saaz. Czech's, okay, it's German enough. Anyways, it's old world hop. It works. It works here beautifully. Our judging panel loved it. And for a beer like this to work, you've got to have that enough of a malt base too. There's so many out there that have kind of in the States. I mean, I'm calling you out, American lager brewers who are just messing around. If your malt base is too thin in one, then you're going to taste hops, but the malt is not really going to hold it all together and make this beautiful kind of harmonious package that a Pilsner ought to be. And this beer does that. It's called the Belknap Pils. And after, tasting it, hearing about it, I definitely would like to get to the shores of Lake Winnipesaukee and taste what else they've got over there.
Sure. Next up on our list of top beers of 2022, King Harbor Choco Latte. This one's a 6.2% kind of flavored stout. We had 2 beers in that stout issue from King Harbor with adjunct ingredients that both were in consideration for this. I think we opted for Choco Latte, number 1, because we love that mole spice, and number 2, because it was a 6.2% flavored beer, and we had plenty of imperial stouts on there. Can't forget this kind of smaller ABV range in this more drinkable package, but also balancing that spice character in something that's so small, pulling that kind of cinnamon, along with, all of this kind of chocolate character, cocoa, this kind of nutty coffee element to it, pulling all of that together and being able to balance that in a 6.2% package is certainly it's a fantastic achievement. It is hard to capture all of those big flavors and do that in such a tight package. You're working within such tight guide rails, and so we can certainly respect the technical achievement that's involved in that. Technical achievement alone does not get you on this list of best beers of 2022. You have to take that technical achievement and also achieve something else that's interesting and that moves the needle and is captivating, and they absolutely do that and I think with this beer, that vanilla becomes the glue that holds it together. It's light, it's small, it gives you the hint of sweetness without actual sweetness. Makes you think that it's sweeter than it is. But I think that pulls this whole thing together in this beautiful, cohesive kind of way. I would love to see more of these flavored stouts in this kind of drinkable ABV territory rather than in that big imperial space. Maybe that's just my own personal political point that I would like to make about this. But I think that it's nice to see this kind of thing, and certainly such a thoughtful, well-considered and well-executed beer in this smaller kind of space from a brewery that, has just kind of popped up and had a number of fantastic beers that our judges have responded to very positively over the course of the past year. I mean, it was just time. It was just this is going to be King Harbor's year. They just had a number of beers that were knocking on that door with high scores across all of these categories. And then, of course, in the stout issue, they nailed it with 2 different beers, both at just the top of the score range. Such a cool thing and awesome to find brewers performing at this level who, just came onto our radar by sending us beer and earning it through that blind review process. Next up is a California Pils from our friends at North Park down in San Diego. The beer is called Birdie to Bogey. This one just crushed it in our lager issue. I think it was a 99 in our lager issue. And we had to create a category now this year for this kind of West Coast or California Pils because it's evolving. It's a real thing. And a lot of brewers sent them to us, enough to create their own category for it. Obviously, if you follow any of the competitions, you know that North Park we're not the only ones to be celebrating North Park this year. They won 4 medals at GABF this past year. They won the American IPA category gold at the World Beer Cup in Minneapolis. I mean, we all know that Kelsey McNair and his brewing team are just absolutely crushing it in North Park. If you want to hear about some of their innovative techniques in the IPA realm, listen to the podcast that I did with them. It's pretty awesome and incredible to hear what they're doing around that. But they can also play right here in this kind of West Coast Pilsner space. My goodness, does this beer just let those hops shine? But does it within that kind of familiar Pilsner, kind of context. It still has a little bit of that sulfur element. It still has, that kind of, white grape, pear, fresh cut grass, peppery tropical bitterness piece. It has those, it's a deft thing to try to capture Pilsner-ish character. And I say Pilsner-ish thinking about that one social media account. I shouldn't call it that. That Pilsner-like character, Pilsner-like character within this context of West Coast, modern contemporary hops. It's definitely an evolving thing. It's certainly something that can trigger people that aren't open to change. Maybe there's going to be a better word in the future for it than calling it something like California Pils or West Coast Pilsner. I don't know. We'll figure all of that out in the future. What I do know is that this beer is phenomenal, worth drinking, and I'm so glad not only that this style exists, that brewers, especially on the West Coast, are pushing things in this kind of direction, figuring out what's possible, but finding a way to make them also feel grounded and connected to some sort of tradition there while also pushing it forward. It's almost like figurative artists, branching out into abstraction, knowing that they are capable of painting in a figurative style, but then choosing to express themselves through abstraction. That's what I feel like with some of these California breweries playing in this kind of space. They're capable of making beautiful, directly to style lager beers. And it's only because they're capable of doing that when they branch out into this kind of creative approach that they can make these beers as compelling as they are. All right, next up on our list, Urban Artifact Teak. Joe, this is our last beer of our top 20 of 2022, and it's a sweet tiki style fruit beer. Let's not even call. I'm not going to use the S word around this one.
No, I wouldn't use the S word around this at all. No. But it is a tart beer, but it's balanced, right? It's all about the fruit. And Urban Artifact in Cincinnati, those folks know what they're doing when it comes to getting out those fruit flavors. I think as fruit beer specialists at this point, I think it's fair to call them that. It's easy to imagine a lot of the brewers out there making fruit beers just dumping a bunch of puree in and figuring it's going to taste good enough. And these guys are not that. They are using plenty of puree, of course, but there's so much more to their process that we're learning about. It's just really kind of fascinating. And the signature kind of hallmark of Urban Artifact fruit beers is that sort of clean, dry finish. So you get this big, punchy fruit character, and then it finishes like it's just gone. It's like, man, gotta drink more of that. Gotta start over again on that. So it's really compelling stuff. One of my favorite beers that I had all year actually was the Gadget from them. I was in Louisville visiting friends and picked some of that up. The Midwest tart beer, I think they call it, something like that, and just full of berries.
Midwest fruit tart.
Yeah, it's just full of berry and fun to drink and really just easily delicious. And so that was
fruit tart. I mean, really, that's a great way to describe these beers.
That's
right?
what they call them. That's what they call them. And this is what they call an American fruit tart. Teak is the tropical American fruit tart. This one's got pineapple and pink guava, and there's limes in there. And it's a funny thing is how often in notes coconut will pop up in there too. Like people think they get it, but I think it's just that strong suggestion of pina colada, what I call the umbrella drink mind trick. And it just adds this sort of, it's tiki. It definitely hits that note. It delivers as promised. For all that sort of, it could go wrong in so many different ways. It could be cloying. It could be too sharp and sour. It never goes wrong in this beer. The balance is lovely on it. It's very easy to drink. It's easy to imagine being on vacation and your aunt's mixing up cocktails in the blender and you're waiting for your next one and getting happily buzzed as the waves hit the shore. It's that kind of beer. Fun beer to drink. And so thank you to the folks at Urban Artifact for taking the art of fruit beer so seriously, because it is one of the most entertaining and compelling categories in American beer today, in my opinion, fruit beer. So another thing about this beer is that Brett Coleman Baker at Urban Artifact has sent us a recipe for teak. It's in my back pocket right now. And it's going to be, we can announce this now, the inaugural All Access recipe is going to be a new feature for our All Access subscribers. Every other week, you're going to get an exclusive recipe that has not yet appeared in the magazine and may never appear in the magazine. It's hard to say. But, and we have a lot more space there where brewers can add thoughts and notes and things. And so you can peek behind the way breweries like Urban Artifact brew these kinds of beers. And it's going to be, I think, really cool. I'm excited about it. So if you are not an All Access subscriber, you should consider it. And if you are an All Access subscriber, then you can look forward to seeing that in your inbox later this week.
Don't miss it. Don't miss it. Subscribe. Support what we do. You know, an Urban Artifact, the intention that they approach this with is so incredible. You know, they are in a lot of ways, like they're using non-aseptic puree. They're going through a process with a number of their ingredients, and they're taking ingredient by ingredient approach. They've got their own cooker to cook, and pasteurize their own puree. They're really looking at how to get the best flavor possible, and however they can do that using whichever products are going to help them achieve that. And it's a level, again, of intention that's awesome to see in this category of beer. And it's why I think there's rise, to the top of this kind of category. Such a cool thing. Anyway, that is our top 20 beers, our editor's picks for the top 20 beers of 2022. We've got a few more reader choice categories to cover before we get out of here. The next category we're going to talk about are your votes for homebrew brands of the year. And that number 10 spot, Bayou. Number 9, Sabco. Number 8, Spike. Number 7, Tilt. Number 6 is Anvil. Number 5, you voted for More Beer. Number 4, The Grainfather. Number 3, Inkbird. Number 2 is also number 2 last year, Blickman. And in the number 1 spot this year, SS Brewtech took the homebrew brand of the year honors. The next category we're going to go through is your favorite homebrew gear. And again, there's 15 in this category. We're going to read the top 10. Number 10 was the Spike Flex Plus. Number 9, SS Brewtech's Chronicle. At the number 8 spot, the Anton Parr Easy Dens, something that I'm seeing spanning across homebrew and professional brewing installations. I love it. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Number 7, the SS Brewtech Infusion Mash Tun. Number 6, the SS Brewtech Brew Bucket. And the number 5, the Grainfather G40 system. Number 4, you voted for the SS Brewtech Unitank. Number 3, the Tilt Hydrometer. Number 2, the Anvil Foundry system. And in the number 1 spot, the Grainfather G30. We've got one reader category left, and that is most popular beer styles. Always an interesting one to go through here, and one where we've noticed some changes this year. Let's go to the very bottom of the list. We added a few more just to capture a few more things this year. At that very low end of the beer style list, but not the lowest, just the lowest that made it onto the list. Smoked beer, cranking out just about 10% of the votes for your favorite beer style. Brown ale, slightly above that one. Barley wine, right around that 15% mark. Quick or kettle sour, slightly above that one. Wild and sour ale, just eking it out over quick and kettle sour. Hefeweizen or wheat, slightly above that one. We're still at about the 17% range now. Right around 18, we've got amber and red. Just slightly above that, English styles. Abbey styles, ever so slightly above that. Porter, just a little bit above that. Vienna lager, eking it out at about the 19.5% point. Small stouts, just peaking above the 20% range. Helles hits in that about 24-ish percent. Saison is just neck and neck with Helles, but ever so slightly ahead of it. Imperial Stout hits that 25% range. And then we get into the big four, a large jump from that kind of 25% point up to the 40% of you that voted for Pale Ale as a favorite style. And then about 42% of you voted for Craft Pilsner as a favorite style. But let's give it to Craft Pilsner as the number 3 on your list of most popular beer styles. Think about how different that is now.
Seriously.
than what this list looked like when we first compiled it, where Craft Pilsner was nowhere close to that point. In the number 2 spot at around 45% of the votes, Hazy IPA. And in the number 1 spot at about 60% of you saying it was your favorite beer style, the American or West Coast IPA. It's a shame everyone didn't get the memo that West Coast IPA is dead. I mean,
right.
It is kind of a shame, right? I mean, if they knew, would they really vote for it like this? I mean, it really is a shame. But yes, once again, American or West Coast IPA is your favorite style of beer. I don't think anyone is really that surprised to see that up there.
No, I think it's fascinating to see. I mean, obviously our readers are brewers predominantly. So also just some hardcore beer geeks I know are there too. But it's kind of interesting to see because to me on most tap lists, I'm still seeing hazies outnumber West Coast American IPAs and such. But it's not necessarily what those of us who brew beer for fun or for a living want necessarily.
Well, there you go. That brings to a close our run through of our best in 2022. Both our readers' choice or our editors' picks and our readers' choice. We try to approach this subject of best in beer from all of these different directions. Another direction that we approach it from is asking our critics for their opinion. And like I said at the top of the episode, this Friday, our critics list edition of Best in Beer will pop out through the podcast feed. So check that out for the opinions of our critics, some of what their top 10 favorite beers were this year. There's no one idea of best. One of the ways that we love to approach this is just through multiplicity. Creating this stack rank or this is better than this, or, just we feel like too narrow of ways to describe all of these things. And so we try to take a broad approach, both asking you, our readers, as well as sharing our critics' opinions, trusting our blind panel, and kind of coming at best through all of these different kinds of channels. Thanks for listening to us on this. For nearly 30 years, G&D Chillers has set the mark for quality equipment you can rely on. Filled like a pro with Pro Fill can fillers from Pro Brew. Think outside the puree box with Old Orchard's craft concentrate blends. American Canning provides packaging supplies at competitive prices in order quantities catered to craft. ABS Commercial is a full-service brewery outfitter for brewers across the country, and craft the perfect pour with superior fruit from the perfect puree. As always, and especially with this issue, go to beerandbrewing.com, click on that subscribe button. Let us know this content matters to you. If you haven't seen a copy of the issue because for some reason you're not a subscriber yet, you don't want to miss all of the depth of content in this issue, because in addition even to this best in beer content, we've got an entire feature package on brewing those fruit beers, not sour, not even tart. We're just going to call them fruit beers.
American fruit beer.
American fruit beer with some deep content on brewing your best versions of those. There's of course broader content through all of this best that we're not covering here on this podcast because we are just out of time. So go to beerandbrewing.com, subscribe to the magazine, get that digital copy, get that print copy mailed to you, become a subscriber, support what we do. We appreciate it. We couldn't bring it to you without your support. We directly depend on your subscriptions to be able to do what we do, to support all the beer, the ecosystem of beer content creators, writers, journalists, and through this entire process that we do. And so thank you all for supporting us on this. Joe, it's been fun to chat. We'll talk again on Friday for the critics edition of the podcast, where you will share your personal top 10 beers on top of this. As always, it's been fantastic. Cheers.
Thank you. Cheers.
This podcast is brought to you by Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine, for those that love to make and drink great beer. Learn more online or subscribe at beerandbrewing.com, or find us on social media at Craft Beer Brew.